The application that I worked on is called BodyFlow, and BodyFlow is an application that allows you to choose exercises or use default exercise playlists. As is with every application, this application has many parts to it: the architecture, the interface, the code design. What I want to focus on though is the I believe the most interesting part of this was the interface, because it required so many different technologies in order for it to even work. It wasn't just straightforward. So let's go ahead and go through like a small introduction, or a small, yeah, I guess introduction of how the interface was developed and how I got all this stuff to work together. So what you're looking at now is a mock-up, and this mock-up is functional. In order for me to even start the interface, I decided to make a mock-up that somewhat looked like the application itself, because I found that that would be very important to be able to communicate what I was thinking about, or what we were all thinking about, and being on the same page as the application went through. In order to create this mock-up, I had to use Photoshop. So here we're in Photoshop, and basically what I have here is just elements that I broke up. It's broken up into pieces, enough pieces in fact that all I had to do was turn pieces on and off, right click on the piece, and send that out as a exported PNG. What I did was I put all of those into an image folder inside of the application itself, and that image folder held all of the base concepts that we needed to create the interface piece by piece. As you can see, these are just little pieces that I was able to combine together in the user interface and the different components. The other interesting thing about putting this all together was how it all came together in XAML. So I'm going to go ahead and run the application, and so you can see what I'm talking about. See, here's the visual look that we wanted. So when everything pulls up, this is actually a list control box, right? So normally a list control doesn't look this way. In order for me to get the list control to look this way, and every time I add an element up in there, I had to use templates and styles inside of WPF. To put all this together, then what I did was I created my templates here, and as you can see, I have my templates for my BodyFlow lists. All of these inside of the app XAML are all the templates that I use to create it, and this is how you have to do it. You have to connect the template to the actual object itself, which, let's say, so if I was talking about the exercise items that I templated, then behind, inside of the exercise items C# file, you'll see what I had to do is I had to create these dependencies. These dependencies are directly connected to the template. So now every time I create an exercise file, it does not look like a standard Windows application. So if I were to click this, you'll see all the elements up in here were styled and templated based off of the elements themselves. When I click on this strength right here, I get these elements down here that allows me to be able to choose the different portions of the human body that the exercise will work on. So what you're looking at here is a combination of the Photoshop elements and the 3D elements that I had to create. So let's talk about the 3D elements for a second and the technologies I had to use in order to make this work. So the first thing I had to do to get this work is go into Maya, and I had to create myself, the elements. This is not a very difficult structure to create, this 3D object here. As you can see, the polygon count is fairly low. The only main thing that I had to worry about was mainly the face and stuff like that, and the eyes and the textures and stuff like that. Then what I did was I exported these out into another 3D application called Blender. And what I did in Blender was I was able to add the tags to the 3D model that I created. After this was completed, I exported this as what's called an OBJ file. I was able to use an open source technology called Helix 3D Toolkit. Helix 3D Toolkit actually was able to make all of this come together, as far as me taking that 3D object, bringing it into WPF, and this is the only one that allowed me to do all the animation, all the other camera movements that I wanted to do in this project. The toughest part about this was that there's not a lot of documentation, so I had to learn a lot about Helix just by using their code and trying to implement it in the code that we had. The overall experience is that you have this 3D object here, and it is based on the gender of the person who is using the application. So if this was a female, this will become a female. And then the experience is that every time you choose a playlist, you'll see that you get the different muscle groups that you're able to use. So before you decide you want that playlist, you know what muscle groups are going to be used. If you want to go ahead and create a custom playlist, Here is another list that we were able to create and allow it to be more dynamic in that it is a list, but it is not, doesn't look like a standard list. And if I click on a playlist, exercise, and I play it and I hit show me, it'll show me the exercise and I can complete my sets while watching it. So this is a pretty straightforward overview of kind of the technologies that I use, a very quick overview of the technologies that I use to be able to develop this user interface and to make it more appealing to the user themselves.